One mistake in the ER can leave your mom, your dad, your grandma, whoever you're caring for, completely alone without walking in with their meds, allergies, or at least emergency contacts written down. And families are making this mistake every single day. Here's a story that shows exactly what that looks like. With one of the families that we're working with, you talk about them having a situation of their own with the person they were caring for in the ER, and then seeing a grandma or an elder lady in the corner who hasn't maybe been tended to because they couldn't get proper information or they just couldn't get the documents they needed to help further. Can you speak more about that?
One of the families that we're working with, they ended up in the ER because of a fall. And as we all know who have ended up in the ER before, the waits are so long. Sometimes you're sitting there in the waiting room for like 6 hours. I know I have. While the woman we're working with was there on behalf of her dad, there was an elderly woman in the corner who had also been brought in for, a health emergency. She had some form of dementia, and no one was able to place who she was. This happens a lot when first responders come in. They actually don't know who the individual is. And because they're in a position in which they can't actually tell first responders who they are, it's a game of trying to figure out, how do you locate the family, find out who would be the first person to call as an emergency contact when something like this happens. And oftentimes it doesn't happen for days. This elderly woman was sitting there in the corner. No one knew her name, and there was no family with her for hours. And I think about this a lot because, again, this is the moment in which it's someone's most vulnerable moment, or one of their most vulnerable moments in life, when there's a health emergency. You want to be there for your family when that happens. You want to be there for your friends, your neighbors when that happens. And if there's no means of being able to locate your community, then you're all alone. And it happens all the time. It's happening every day, all over the country right now.
One of the fixes for this for the longest time has been the Vial of Life. Speaking with a fire chief last week, what did they have to say about the Vial of Life, and why is it sort of an outdated system that we can no longer really rely on?
Vial of Life was a good solution for its day. It was intended to help first responders when a family member was non-responsive in their home, and they knew they could immediately go to a place where they could find their, latest information. It is a piece of paper. We have moved well past that today. We have so many better tools for helping to ensure that what the Vial of Life was ultimately intending to accomplish, which was putting the right information into a first responder's hands within seconds, when every second counts. There are much better ways to do this than a piece of paper. Vial of Life gets outdated very quickly. It can't really be easily updated from anywhere remotely. So if you actually have someone who doesn't live in your home who's really managing your care, like the experience for my dad and I, it's literally impossible for me to keep this piece of paper updated. That's really where we sat down. We listened across the board to first responders. We listened who are in people's homes every day. We listened to those who are overseeing large populations in places like independent living facilities, of how can we help? How can we make this experience better for families and for everyone who is really looking to do their best to care for those family members? And so the Tender ID is really our answer to that. We purpose-built this with the input from firemen, from independent living facilities, from EMTs. This is really what we know is our gift to communities, for as many families as we can possibly touch with the Tender ID, to make sure that if and when there is a moment that someone who is important to you is having a heart attack, having a stroke, is in need of real help, that there is going to be nothing between someone looking to help them and the right care. And so that's really the role the Tender ID plays, is it's arming a first responder or an EMT with the right information to be able to very quickly make sure that they are giving the best care to the person whose information they now have available to them. And also, really, really importantly, that now every person on the family who is connected to that Tender ID has been alerted that there has been an incident, there's something going on, and it's time to step in and make sure that the family is coordinating around that individual. There isn't days going by in which everybody thinks everything is fine, and actually mom or dad or grandma has been in the ER in a hospital for the last 2 days with a whole team trying to find who to call. We want to make sure that there is not another incident in which that happens, and that every family who spends just a little bit of time preparing ahead of time will now be able to have the peace of mind that they've got backup and support through the Tender ID.
Being a caregiver for your dad 3,000 miles away obviously poses some challenges. You spoke earlier about the story of what happened this morning. How do you navigate the challenge of having to care for your dad, and then sort of taking what challenges you see in caring for your dad, and then like removing, or maybe not even removing, the emotion out of that to then build a tool to make sure other families don't have to go through something like that?
It's really hard. I think you see a lot of people who come into this space who were caregivers and now are in a space in which that chapter is behind them. And so now they've got more room to be really thinking about what this means for other people. I chose not to go that route, and I chose to start building while I'm actively taking care of my dad. For me, selfishly, it gives meaning to the heartache. So when I get the call this morning and, my stomach drops because you hear there's been an accident and my mind starts racing, I immediately jump off Zoom and was on a call with the rest of the team to go and figure out what this means and what's going on. I'm a daughter first, before building for anybody else. And so I'm constantly in tension of, am I spending enough time caring for my dad? Have I really thought through all of the different possible outcomes of what could happen this week? And is he safe? Is he protected? And then thinking through, how do we take this body of knowledge and this incredibly talented team and build for all of those who are actively going through this alongside me? Is a balancing act. I don't think I ever really get it right, but I do know that every minute that I'm working on this matters. I can't ignore that because I'm actively in it with my family. And I say it's selfish because, I go through something like I did this morning where I'm just like racing to try and figure out, how do I literally help get my dad off the floor 3,000 miles away because he's too heavy for my caregiver to be able to lift him. And there's one part of me that's just like, okay, I got to solve this for my dad right now. He is on the floor of my dad's bathroom, and until we figure this out, he is not getting up. And then there's this other part of my brain that's like, okay, this is going to really help, because if I can work through this with my own dad and my own care team, we're immediately going to be able to think about how we do this for others. It provides the experience of taking care of my dad with so much extra meaning and so much purpose, which is that I don't want to just solve this for my family. I want to solve this for everybody else's family too. So the two are in tension all the time. One robs from the other. If I'm spending too much time working on tender care and with the team, I feel like I'm not spending enough of my energy and my time with my dad. If I'm spending too much time with my dad, I'm not keeping pace and building fast enough with my team. So sometimes I give a little more time to tender care some days, and sometimes I give a little more time to my dad and my family other days. And I got to hope that at some point this will all even out.
As a former caregiver for my grandmother, and as somebody who's experienced a fall, sometimes in the moment when EMS is at your house because there's an emergency, you don't have all the answers that they need. I couldn't even remember my grandmother's birthday. That's why we made the Tender ID free for everybody, because we don't want any caregiver or any family to go through an emergency unprepared. So get your Tender ID set up today. There's a link in the description. You can click it. It's going to ask you a few questions. And just taking a few minutes to prepare will save you a lifetime of heartache and headache from just taking a few minutes to answer the questions and getting set up with a Tender ID. I hope you get one set up today, and I hope to see you in the next episode.